In the grand theater of American politics, the Democratic Party has long positioned itself as the champion of the working class, a bulwark against Republican excesses, a voice for the marginalized. Yet, beneath this veneer lies a persistent truth. The party has repeatedly sidelined socialist-leaning candidates and progressive reformers, not out of ideological purity, but to safeguard the interests of its wealthy donors, corporations, and Wall Street financiers. This isn't mere coincidence, it's a calculated strategy that prioritizes big money over bold policies that could uplift the masses. By tracing key historical moments, from the post-World War II era to the present, we see a pattern. Whenever a truly transformative figure emerges, threatening the status quo of corporate influence, the Democratic establishment mobilizes to crush them. The result? Policies that placate donors while leaving working-class Americans, factory workers, service employees, and the precariat, struggling with stagnant wages, unaffordable health care, and eroding social safety nets. Consider the fateful 1944 Democratic National Convention, where the party's power brokers orchestrated one of the most consequential rejections in modern history, sidelining Vice President Henry A. Wallace in favor of Harry S. Truman. Wallace, a staunch progressive with roots in agrarian populism, advocated for policies that would have revolutionized post-war America. He pushed for full employment, universal health care, civil rights advancements, and a cooperative foreign policy that might have averted the Cold War's escalations. His vision aligned with Franklin D. Roosevelt's New Deal ethos but went further, challenging corporate monopolies and racial segregation head-on. Yet, as Roosevelt's health faltered, making the vice presidential slot a de facto presidential audition, conservative Democrats, backed by Southern segregationists, city machine bosses, and business interests, viewed Wallace as a threat. They feared his softness on communism, red willingness to negotiate with the Soviets, and his pro-labor stance would alienate wealthy donors and industrialists profiting from wartime contracts. The convention descended into chaos, with party elites manipulating the process to nominate Truman, a more moderate, business-friendly senator from Missouri. If Wallace had prevailed, history might have unfolded differently. No atomic bombs on Japan, perhaps, stronger social welfare programs akin to those in Europe, and a domestic agenda that prioritized workers over war profiteers. Instead, Truman's ascension led to policies like the Taft-Hartley Act, which crippled unions, and a foreign policy that funneled trillions into military spending, funds that could have built schools, hospitals, and infrastructure for the working class. This rejection wasn't about electability, it was about protecting the donor class from a leader who might disrupt their gravy train. The working class paid the price, as income inequality began its slow creep upward in the ensuing decades. Fast forward to the 2000 election cycle, where the Democratic establishment again demonstrated its aversion to genuine reformers by marginalizing Ralph Nader, the consumer advocate whose career was a testament to fighting corporate greed. Nader, running as the Green Party candidate, had a storied history of social reforms. He spearheaded auto safety regulations that saved countless lives, exposed environmental hazards, and challenged monopolistic practices through landmark legislation like the Clean Air Act and the Freedom of Information Act. His platform called for single-payer health care, living wages, and curbs on corporate influence, policies that directly threatened the party's big donors in big pharma, energy, and finance. Yet, the Democratic leadership, under the influence of figures like Al Gore and the Clintons, worked to exclude Nader from the national conversation. He was barred from the presidential debates by the Bipartisan Commission on Presidential Debates, which set arbitrary polling thresholds that favored major party candidates. More pointedly, the party apparatus vilified Nader as a spoiler, with prominent Democrats, including those close to Hillary Clinton, echoing calls to suppress third-party challenges that could siphon votes from Gore. This was a false narrative, since Nader had no delusions about winning the nomination. He wanted a place at the table, and accountability for the workers' agenda. The big donors wanted not part of it. This wasn't just electoral strategy, it was a defense of the neoliberal order the Clintons helped cement, where trade deals like NAFTA hollowed out manufacturing jobs while enriching multinational corporations. Nader's exclusion ensured that working-class issues, like fair trade and worker protections, remained sidelined, contributing to Gore's narrow loss and the Bush-era's tax cuts for the rich and endless wars. Hillary found out the hard way in 2016 that the working class could not be taken for granted. Many of the working-class voters turned to MAGA, in their desperation to have their voices heard. Clinton stated that half of Trump's supporters could be placed into a basket of deplorables, which only added insult to injury. Today, the scars are evident: deindustrialized communities, wage stagnation, and a gig economy that exploits the vulnerable, all while Democratic donors amassed fortunes. This pattern repeated in 2020 with Bernie Sanders, the Vermont senator whose decades-long crusade for social justice made him a beacon for the working class. Sanders, a self-described democratic socialist, built his career on advocating for Medicare for all, tuition-free college, and a $15 minimum wage, reforms drawn from his early days as mayor of Burlington, where he championed affordable housing and workers' rights. His 2020 campaign surged on grassroots energy, winning early primaries and amassing a multiracial coalition of young voters and laborers tired of incrementalism. But the establishment struck back. Enter House Majority Whip Jim Clyburn, whose endorsement of Joe Biden on February 26, 2020, just days before the South Carolina primary, proved pivotal. Clyburn, a key figure in the party's moderate wing with ties to corporate donors, framed Biden as the safe choice, leveraging his influence among black voters to deliver a landslide win in South Carolina. This momentum carried into Super Tuesday, where a flood of endorsements from party insiders and super PAC money from Wall Street drowned Sanders' campaign, along with any hope for real reform. Sanders didn't lose because his ideas were unpopular. Polls showed broad support for his policies. He lost because the Democratic machine, beholden to billionaires and corporations, couldn't tolerate a candidate who might tax the wealthy or regulate industries like healthcare and fossil fuels. The result? A Biden administration that, while progressive in rhetoric, has often prioritized donor-friendly policies like modest student debt relief over systemic change, leaving working-class families grappling with inflation and housing crises. This donor-driven aversion to socialism didn't end with these figures. It permeated Barack Obama's presidency and persists today. Obama, propelled to victory in 2008 with significant Wall Street donations, over $15 million from the finance sector alone, promised hope and change but delivered bailouts that rescued banks while foreclosures ravaged working-class homes. His administration's Dodd-Frank reforms were a step forward but watered down under pressure from donors, failing to break up, too big to fail, institutions or prosecute the architects of the financial crisis. Policies like the Affordable Care Act expanded access but preserved private insurance profits, hurting those in low-wage jobs without employer coverage. Obama's courtship of Wall Street for re-election funds further entrenched this dynamic, shifting focus from inequality to middle-class uplift that left the poorest behind. Fast forward to 2024 and 2025, and the Democratic Party's stance remains unchanged, a reflexive opposition to socialist candidates who challenge corporate hegemony. In the 2024 election cycle, party operatives scrambled to remove third-party socialist contenders, like those from the Party for Socialism and Liberation, from ballots in swing states such as Wisconsin and Michigan, fearing they might draw votes from Kamala Harris. Even within the party, Democratic socialists like those affiliated with the Democratic Socialists of America, DSA, face uphill battles, with establishment Democrats funding primary challengers against progressives who advocate for working-class priorities like universal health care and green jobs. As of 2025, with economic inequality at historic highs, the party's reluctance to embrace bold, socialist-inspired policies, such as wealth taxes or nationalized industries, continues to color its approach, alienating the very base it claims to represent. In conclusion, the Democratic Party's history of rejecting figures like Wallace, Nader, and Sanders isn't about pragmatism, it's about power and profit. By prioritizing big donors over the working class, the party perpetuates a system where policies tinker at the edges rather than transform society. True progress demands breaking this cycle, embracing socialist ideas not as threats, but as solutions. Until then, the working class will remain pawns in a game rigged by the elite. FDR, Kennedy Johnson, and Jimmy Carter were fair to the working class, and kept reformers as a core part of their administrations. But since the 1980s, Wall Street insiders have dominated policy, while the working class agenda was sidelined. Now we need to elect leaders who will prioritize the working class, and get their funding from the grassroots. Bernie showed this could be done in 2020. Pointing fingers at Republicans is not the solution. If the working class is not front and center of the agenda, the Dems will once again have missed a golden opportunity to unite the working class behind them in 2026. Thank you for listening.